Hello and welcome back to Logan Sounds Off. Today I am talking to one of the greatest indie rock icons of the last 20 years. I'm talking to E from the EELS. How are you, E?
Wow, what an introduction, Logan. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for joining me. It's great to see you today. And for those who don't know you or are unfamiliar with the EELS and their music, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, the EELS' first album came out in 1996. What year were you born?
2011.
Okay, so I think of 2011 as one of my more recent tours that I remember. So yeah, it was a long time ago. We've been around for a long time, and that's why I look so old. But I'm feeling good, and creative juices keep flowing. I don't see any reason for things to slow down anytime soon.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. And we're going to speak about how things are speeding up with your new album, EELS Time, pretty soon. But before that, I'd just like to come back to where the creative juices started to flow, where you grew up with a lot of music. And I read that your interest in music, predominantly rock music, began with your sister's record collection. So, what
Yes,
kind of music was in her collection that inspired you?
I got lucky that my sister was 6 years older than me, so she was quite a bit older than me, but we were very close, and she was really nice to me, and she had good taste in music, and she was always playing her records every day after school. I remember like being so little that I was playing with like my model trains and listening to Neil Young's After the Gold Rush album, which is a really great album. I recommend. Um, and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Who and just a lot of good stuff that was. I got lucky because it was all good influences.
Wow, that sounds like an impressive collection. And then obviously growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was a very interesting time for music. A lot of different types of music was coming out. The Beatles were in their prime and they ended in just that 2 decade period. A lot was happening. So for yourself, growing up in this incredible era for music, not just rock music, what was it like for yourself?
Um, well, I was very little, like when I got into the Beatles after they had broken up, um, and they were already like considered old news, like by my friends. Like I was the guy who liked old music. Oh, sorry, my dogs just came in. Sorry. Hey guys, hi. Hi. You want to see one of my dogs?
Sure.
Yeah. Come here. Come here. Come here, guys. Oh, no. All right. They're not in the mood. Sorry. They're not in the mood. They're making a lot of noise though. You can hear them. Sorry, guys. All right. Sorry. Well, I'm sorry. What was the question?
We were speaking about the 60s and 70s and how the Beatles for your friends were old
Oh, yeah,
news.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, my friends, like, when I was like 10, I got into the Beatles, and my friends were all like, "Oh, you're the guy who listens to old, music." They were into whatever was on the top 40 radio, and I didn't care about that. I was just into stuff that was before my time, really. And it's still the stuff that is my favorite.
Wow. It's interesting actually about that where it became old so fast where people
Yeah.
now reckon with it as the greatest band ever and it just went like that back then. It's interesting. And not only were you interested in listening to music, you also were very interested with playing music because at 6, you started to play the drums and then you taught yourself the guitar on your sister's guitar. Or what or who, because there are some great musicians out there, inspired you to start playing music?
Well, probably Ringo, because of the drums and uh, it all just clicked for me. My next door neighbors, when I was 6, had a garage sale, and they had like a little toy drum set for $15, and I begged my parents for the money, and they made the mistake of letting me get the drums. And most kids play the drums for a few days, and then within a week they kind of lose interest, and that's the end of it. I played them in the house every day for 10 years. I was just obsessed with them. I loved drumming. Um, and I think Ringo, I was a little kid who was into the Beatles, even though they'd already broken up. And Ringo was my first favorite, because, he's kind of like the lovable, cartoony hangdog uh, drummer. And I think that added to my wanting to play drums.
Wow, that's an interesting influence, Ringo. And like you were mentioning there, playing drums every day in your house for 10 years. Music was a big and is still a massive part of your life. So when you were older, you relocated to Los Angeles to pursue music. So obviously there's a big difference in the music scene. So seeing this moving over to play music, what was it like the shift from music scene to music scene?
I don't feel like I've paid much attention to that. I don't think like, when I first moved from Virginia to Los Angeles, it was the late 80s, and the big music scene at the time was like what they called hair metal, like Poison and Guns N' Roses, and like that stuff was the big stuff. And I didn't care about any of that at all. And I got my first record deal despite not having any relation to that whatsoever. And I was just this weird guy writing these little songs that didn't sound like anything else that was going on at the time. And I've sort of just always operated that way in general. I don't, I've never been part of a scene, I don't think.
Wow, and you mentioned there about your record deal and playing with those two albums where you went as E. And it's interesting because you were coming around the right time because you were mentioned there in the late 80s, hair metal was really popular. But when you started releasing music with the Eels and you were finishing up as E, as a solo career, you really started to make music that suited people at that time. But looking back when you were releasing stuff like A Man Called E, your debut album as a solo artist, and then Broken Toy Shop following on, how do you look at them now?
They're not my favorites, I don't know. I mean, I don't hear anything from them very often, so I don't know. But I definitely feel like I was still developing during that period, and I, I, I feel like I didn't really start to mature as a songwriter and as a producer uh, until the Eels started, and then I think I got better at that point.
Wow. And when your debut album then 1996, Beautiful Freak, which you produced yourself, and this was when people really started to notice you after you finished up as E, you received some amazing reviews. MTV had a lot of attention to Novocaine for the Soul, and tons of people were hearing your music and loving it. How did that feel?
Um, well, it was very welcome in some ways, to like finally have some success. But I also learned that there was a lot about it that I didn't like. That I just felt like there was a lot of like phoniness to the whole commercial world, and it particularly felt weird because we were back then it was called an alternative band. Alternative to what? I don't know, but uh, um, and that spoke of like um, some sort of credibility, and realism, I think, and it was hard to, which is how I felt. I felt like credible and real, but then you're in these situations where you're asked to do stuff that felt phony and fake all the time, and I couldn't put those two together, and I kind of wanted to retreat from it. So then I made the second Eagles album, Electroshock Blues, which was this album about people in my family dying, and my manager was against it, and everybody was like, nobody wants to hear an album about death, but I was adamant. I really believed in it, and it probably seemed like to the business people that we were working with like it was me trying to commit commercial suicide, and I knew it wasn't going to like sell well and be a hit and all that, but I'm really glad I did it because I think it's one of our best records, and it's meant a lot to a lot of people over the years.
It really has, and I've read some things where people talk about electroshock blues and how much it helped them through difficult times. So you were saying there you didn't think it would be a commercial success, but it actually turned out that people thought it was your magnum opus, and you sold a lot of records. Were you surprised when this happened?
Yeah, because my manager was so against it, I ended up having to fire him, and it was really hard because he was like my father figure. He was very important to me, but I I really had to take a stand because I was he would have wanted me to like just do Beautiful Freak Part Two, and like there everybody was just like just have hits, and that's all they cared about, and I just wanted to do something that felt real and was important to me. And yeah, now that's the one that like gets singled out the most as people's favorites of all of the records we've done. So no regrets.
No, and I definitely agree with that because all of your albums feel really just uh authentic. When you're listening to even the largest album you've released, Blinking Lights and Other Revelations, you never had commercial albums where it would be 10 tracks, 40 minutes released. You always had the album, a proper full album, because I spoke about this in an album review the other day. It's surprising how many albums aren't complete, that they're just put out as commercial albums. So it's great to hear you making music like that where it is complete. And you're going to be releasing pretty soon your 15th studio album, um, Time, EELS Time, which I'm very excited for. I've had a listen to it, and I just think it's an incredible record. Again, full like the rest of them. It's a proper record. So, are you excited for its release?
Yeah, I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I am excited about it. I'm just excited that it's finally, after all these years, it's finally Eels time.
I love the title. When I originally heard it was announced, I just thought it was incredible. And now, where I mentioned there are 15 studio albums, that's a lot. You released a lot of live albums as well. So looking back to when you released Beautiful Freak, and to now when you're releasing Eels Time, what's it like? Have you felt that you've um nearly matured as a songwriter and as a musician?
I mean, hopefully I haven't immatured. Hopefully I haven't gone backwards, Although maybe that's appropriate sometimes, for some songs. But um, I mean, I just feel so lucky. I can't believe I got to make one album, let alone 15 plus the other two before that. It's like it's a miracle because when I was your age, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have any hope for my future. I didn't. I couldn't picture being older and what I would be doing. There wasn't anything I wanted to do. And when I was just out of high school, I had a girlfriend who said, "Why don't you like pursue music as a job? Like you're good at it." And I thought, well, I was kind of, I had a high school band that I played drums in and sang in, and we were popular in high school. But I just like, I can be uh, a big fish in a little pond, as it were, but I don't think I could be a big fish in a big pond. I don't think I could ever make a living at this. And then it just got to the point where, I was like 20, 21, and I was thinking like, well, I don't know what else to do. So I guess I'm gonna take her advice, and I just drove across the country to Los Angeles because that's where you're supposed to go if you want to do something in music. Um, and it took about 3 years where I was really miserable and having a hard time and working jobs I hated. And then the miracle of all miracles happened, and I got a record deal. And
Wow.
that only lasted a couple of years and 2 albums, and then I lost the record deal, and then I got another one. So I've had several since then, and it's I just can't believe like it turned out so well.
Well,
So
it
my
just
so I guess the
sorry.
lesson is listen to your girlfriend
Good lesson.
or
And
boyfriend or whoever.
yeah. And it really, that story nearly teaches you to be grateful for everything you have. It's an incredible story. And a lot of your stories go into your songs. And you released your first single for the new album, EELS Time, only recently. You've got three out now, but the first one being Time. And I remember when that came out and I looked at the video and all the comments saying different things about how important this track was to them and how they could relate to it and everything. How did that feel when you saw all of that coming up and people absolutely loving this track?
It felt really good because I was very happy with the track, and it was kind of unusual to put that out as like a first single kind of song because it doesn't have any drums and it's not like a big hit sounding song. But I just felt like it was kind of an important song, and I like how simple it is. It's very simple. There's not a lot of lyrics to it. That's my favorite kind of writing, and it's also, I think, the hardest kind of writing and the rarest kind of writing is something that's about a big, heavy, universal subject that only has a few lines of lyrics and still manages to tell a story or make a point. And I felt like I had done that with that song, and I was feeling good about it.
Yeah, it's an incredible track, and if you haven't listened to it, the listener or the viewer, make sure to check it out at Official Eels on YouTube. Make sure to pre-order the new album. It's just incredible. And that song is just fantastic. And look, we've been talking here about a very successful career you've had, and you've done a lot. We mentioned 15 studio albums, the two before that. You've released a lot of music and you know a lot about the industry. So, for younger artists who maybe are trying to release an album or they've released one but they're struggling as a songwriter, what tips would you give to them?
Um, I mean, just keep going, keep it's amazing if you just keep doing anything, how much better you can get at it just from the sheer trial and error and repetition. And like for me, I just had such a passion for it. I was always in my teens and 20s. I had a little four track cassette recorder, and I was just always obsessively writing and recording, and they were terrible at first, like really terrible. And over the years, they slowly got better and better. And then one day you wake up and you feel like, oh, I'm not too bad. Got a little bit of confidence now.
Wow. So, any songwriters out there, if you're watching this, make sure to heed that advice. And then, as well, you've done a lot of different videos. As my final question, I want to ask you, because I saw you on Amoeba doing What's in My Bag, and you have a very eclectic and very, in my opinion, interesting and fantastic taste in music. So, I wanted to ask you for myself, what recommendations would you give to the listener who's trying to look for some music to listen to?
Well, all the stuff that's in my amoeba bag, which you can see on YouTube, I would recommend. I would recommend, as far as like what I was just saying about the rarest, the hardest kind of writing being very succinct, uh, not a lot of lyrics, but still manage to tell a story or make a big point about a universal theme. an album I would recommend that meant a lot to me and was probably my biggest influence when I was a kid uh, is a John Lennon album called Plastic Ono Band. Um, it's some of the song titles are, a lot of them are just one word, like love, God, mother, and there's not a lot of lyrics. If you look at the lyric sheet for the album, each song is very brief, and they're just unbelievable songs about really heavy stuff. And this was like right after the Beatles had broken up, and it was really groundbreaking because here's like the biggest music star in the world, just bearing his soul and in a really beautiful way. And definitely recommend that one more than anything, probably. And also After the Gold Rush, Neil Young, amazing. I mean, there's so many amazing Neil Young records. And everything that's in my Amoeba bag.
I'll have that linked below, guys. So if you want to see that Amoeba video, check it out in the description. But there's some great recommendations. I'm going to check out that Neil Young album along with Plastic Ono Band because actually just before the interview, I was listening to Neil Young's new live album, which is incredible. But no, they're great recommendations. So, EELS, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you.
Oh, it's an honor to be here, Logan. Your podcast is fantastic. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, E. Have a lovely day.
You too.
Bye, E. Thank you so much.
See ya.